Hello, my name is Hector Acuna. I'm an artist living in Grafton, Wisconsin. This is part 2 of an ongoing video series for the 30 by 30 by 30 exhibition that I introduced in part 1. So welcome back to the series. I'm excited today to share the process of making the egg tempera panels with a traditional gesso on aluminum composite material. Now, before I show you some of the process, I did want to take a second and kind of follow up to something I mentioned in part 1, which was that I've been noticing some small cracking, hairline cracking on past egg tempera paintings that I've made so far. Now, in part 1, I showed a painting that had a hand with part of another arm kind of sticking through it. It was a very viridian green kind of color palette. That painting was made on a piece of sandy plywood. It was 1/2 inch thick that I purchased from Home Depot and I cut down myself. It was one of the first panels that I primed with that traditional easy gesso from Rublev Colors, which is the gesso that I'll be using on the ACM panels today. Something that I noticed after 20 minutes of painting on that panel is that the moisture in the paint was cracking the surface of the gesso on the panel. Now, the reason for that is that on the sandy plywood, the grain of the wood is really noticeable and very prominent. So the moisture sort of emphasizes those cracks and it begins to kind of ghost itself into the surface of the painting with small little cracks. When I noticed that, I did some research and I picked up a book by the artist Ku Shadler, which is the comprehensive guide to egg tempera painting. If you're looking to get into egg tempera painting, this is the #1 book that I would recommend. Honestly, I haven't even read through all of the chapters because it's a very dense guide on egg tempera painting, but it covers everything from making the paint to the emulsion ratio that you want to use to options for your support or panel you'll be painting on, and then all the way into like painting techniques and even some history on the medium. So Ku Shadler is an amazing painter. She's an amazing teacher from what I can tell from the book, but also through research on her and her work that I've done online. Anyway, so through Ku's book, I found the reasons why that panel was cracking. So I thought I might be able to fix the problem by using birch plywood, which is a much more smooth veneer on that type of plywood. Here's an example of a plywood panel. And you know, if you look closely, the grain is relatively short. It's also not very prominent or deep into the wood. For the most part, this has worked really well. Now on this panel, you might be able to tell that the corner of the face of the panel is beveled. And that was made by sanding down the edge of the plywood, which was partially an aesthetic preference that I wanted to explore. But I also thought maybe that would help with the gesso not cracking on the panel. And it actually turns out that might have been a mistake. So here's one of the panels that was totally gessoed. This has 7 layers of the easy gesso from Rublev. And if we look closely, I'm hoping that this will show up on camera. There are very small cracks along the middle of the panel on the edges. And I think some of that is because of the type of material that the plywood is. Some of it could also be the moisture that then dried from the gesso over time. And I noticed this on some of the finished egg tempera paintings that I've done on the same type of beveled birch plywood. All that being said, I went back to Ku's book, I did more research online, and I've decided that for the 30 by 30 by 30 paintings, I'll be using aluminum composite material panels, otherwise known as ACM panels. You might see oil painters working on this material. A lot of people use Dye-Bond, which is a company that makes ACM panels. And luckily for me, I have some scrap pieces of ACM to create all 30 of my egg tempera paintings. I'll be showing you how I cut down the ACM material into the sizes that I want to paint on, cradle the backs of them with wood that I'll be using when I make the custom frames for each painting. And then I'll also talk about how I'm going to apply the easy gesso. Some of this information is going to be coming from research that I've been doing online, in Ku's book, but also in other YouTube videos. So if you're interested in working on ACM panels, especially with egg tempera, I highly encourage that you check out the work of Julio Reyes, who has some examples of his painting process on YouTube. You might be able to find more information on his work just through Google search as well. And then there's a couple other channels that I'm forgetting the names of right now that have talked about using easy gesso or another tempera ground on ACM panels who have videos online here on YouTube. So Feel free to check those out as well. I do want to have a short disclaimer in this video because a lot of these materials are new for me in my process with egg tempera. I don't want to present this video as a tutorial in any way. Rather, this is a video that is sharing my process of experimentation, exploration of materials that hopefully can benefit you if you're interested in working with similar materials in your own art practice. So that being said, welcome to part 2 of this series. I'm hoping to get all of the material prep shown in this video in part 2 before we get into other aspects of preparing for the work to be made in January in part 3 of this series. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much for watching, and if you have any questions or feedback and comments, feel free to leave those down below. Thanks so much. Enjoy. All right, so I'm out here in my garage, and you know, over the past couple of days, I've been trying to decide what I want to make my egg tempera panels on. So some of my favorite contemporary egg tempera painters I know work on a material that is called aluminum composite material panels, or ACM panels. One of the most popular brands of ACM panels is Dibond, and fortunately, I actually have some Dibond-like material with me. A couple of years ago, back in 2021, I was juried into a public art mural opportunity in Lansing, Michigan. This was shortly before Megan and I moved back to Wisconsin. I made this outdoor painting that was mobile, and it was on this type of paneling. So I had to buy 2 big sheets of 4 by 8 foot ACM panels from a company that I believe was over in Grand Rapids. And they cut it down for me slightly just so it could fit in my van, because I am not able to fit 8-foot long boards in my van. And they took off about 6 inches or so. So basically they trimmed off these extra pieces that are 4 feet long by, let's see. So they trimmed off those 4 by 8 foot sheets on both ends. So these are now 4 feet long by 5 3/4. So there's plenty of material here for me to make my 30. I just have to decide what sizes I want to make my panels, and whether or not I want to cradle the backside of these. And that's really dependent on how I want to frame all of these paintings. So I'm not sure yet how I want to do that. I'm leaning towards doing either a square size, so maybe like 5 by 5 inches, or going with a 4-inch by 5-inch size. I've painted small casein paintings at that size that I really like, so I could see that being a really comfortable size to make daily paintings on. But anyway, I'm really excited because I have my material figured out. ACM panels are essentially 2 very thin pieces of aluminum that sandwich a piece of plastic, which helps save on the weight of the paneling. This is what outdoor road signs are made out of. You can see where I've already tested the surface for adhering paint to it, a latex outdoor paint for murals. This is probably what I'll have to do for the easy gesso as well. All right, so I'm over at Home Depot. I'm looking at boards, and I need something that's 3/4 of an inch. I'm either gonna get the Select Pine behind me here, or I'll get the common pine boards. And these are looking pretty rough, so I think I'll go with the Select, which I think I can probably use some of that for other framing purposes anyways. So I'm gonna get a 6 foot long by almost 12-inch wide board, and gotta find one that's straight. All right, so I found a board that is going to be straight enough here, and luckily it was right on top of the pile. But just to give myself another option, I also checked out another board. This is how you can tell if the board is going to be straight or not. You want to look at it from one end like this and see if it has any kind of curve or bow down the board. So this is the one that I'm going to take. Let me show you one that's not straight, just so you can see the difference real quick. See how much this one curves? So depending on your project, you can get away with a board that's like this, but most projects you're gonna want something that's straight. So this is not the board that I'll be taking today. Especially if you're gonna spend $30 or $31 on a piece of wood, you wanna make sure that it's gonna work. You might be wondering how I'm going to glue the wood to the back of the aluminum panels, and this is what I usually use anytime I need a really strong bond, especially if they're with materials that are not always organic. You know, if it's wood, I'll go with my normal Type Bond wood glue, but this Gorilla epoxy glue is going to work really well. And I use this on a lot of other projects too, but I think one should be enough. I'm also going to pick up some sandpaper to give myself a nice smooth finish on these panels, so this will work. I'm also in Home Depot today looking at blinds. All right, I've got the box cutter and a ruler. And I think right now my plan is to make all of the panels 4 inches by 5 inches, which is this size here. I really like this little painting that I made on a paper panel with casein paint on mounted Reeves BFK. So I really like the size and the proportions. So this is like a 8 by 10 shrunk down, or a 16 by 20 shrunk down to a 4 by 5 inch size. So what I'll probably end up doing is cutting them all out this way so that they're in 4 inches this way, and then I'll have to trim off the top so that it comes down to 5 inches. Because right now the height of this piece of ACM is 5 3/4 inches, which is a little bit too tall. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut one of them down and just see how hard it is to actually cut these, because I've seen videos of people doing this, and I think this is gonna be the first time that I'll have tried this. Let's try a Sharpie here. So I'm gonna make a mark at 4 there. I'm gonna make a mark at 4 here. Draw a line. Just in case the ruler moves. And we'll do the same thing over on this side. I think this is like a type of plastic that comes off. Yeah, it's protective coating. So 4 inches on this side. We're gonna have to score both sides of the panel. And then I think once you score it a few times on both sides, you should be able to just snap it. That's what I've seen other artists do with this stuff. All right, so I might as well start on this side. This is a pretty dull box cutter blade, so we'll see how well this works. Right now, everything is a bit of an experiment, but that's okay. That's when it's a lot of fun, right? So it's about 4 times on that side. It's already made it through the aluminum into some of the plastic. Let's do the same thing on this side. I wonder if I'll have to sand all of these edges so that the sharpness of the aluminum doesn't throw off the gesso or the paintings. Okay. Let's scoot this over just a bit so you can see this. Hold it along the edge, and wow, I didn't even have to really push. Look at how nice and clean that was. You can see the edge there. The only thing I notice is that there's a bit of a curve or like a bevel on one side. So I'll just have to be kind of careful about that, I think. Making sure that when I'm scoring that the blade is going, you know, straight into the material, not at an angle at all. Otherwise, that worked out pretty well. This piece has a rough corner, so I either have to like re-trim this edge, because I don't want this to be the front if there's this beveled edge on this side. I'd rather see a flatter like cut down or even an angle the opposite direction. So maybe I'll try that. Let's also just remeasure this real quick. So actually I probably could trim off this little extra bit of plastic right there. Might as well try to do it real quick. That vinyl plastic stuff in the middle cuts really easily. I mean, honestly, the whole thing cuts really easily, which is really nice to know. Okay, that looks good. And the nice thing too is that this piece is already buffed with sandpaper from a past project, so I can toss some of these little scraps away. I'll have to be careful about pieces of aluminum. Maybe I'll have to bring the vacuum cleaner in here and just vacuum that up. All right, so that's good to know. I'm gonna bring this out in the garage. That way I have something to reference the, oh, actually I need to trim down the 5-inch side. I almost forgot. Let's do that real quick too. And I'm thinking I'll probably just float the paintings, do little floater frames for these, with some kind of relatively nice looking hardwood. Uh-oh, looks like I cut my pinky there just a little bit. I don't know if you can see, there's just a little bit of blood. Gotta be careful working with this aluminum. It's really sharp. Maybe at some point I'll have to wear gloves. There. Here. So I think it'll get easier as I cut these over time. Edge again. Maybe cut it a couple more times on both sides. All right, cool. Seems easy enough to handle. Now we have our 4 by 5 inch piece. Looks like it curves in just a little bit. Well, actually, no, it's about the same width. So they might vary a little bit from piece to piece, which, you know, that doesn't really bother me too much, but got 4 inches there. Just under 4 inches on that side. I think that was when I had to cut that angle. And then just under 5, or just right at about 5. And one way to check if things are square is to go at both diagonals. So this is 6 3/8 inch on that side, and then just a little bit over 6 3/8 on that side. So that tells me this piece is not perfectly square. It's really close though. It's pretty close. So I'll probably still gesso this piece, and it might be an extra backup piece in case something happens to one of the other ones. And I think the plan is to probably glue the wood on the back here for the cradle. The frames that I'll make will look kind of like this style. I don't know if it'll be this type of wood necessarily, but it'll be that style and that thickness most likely. So this will kind of be the look of the finished pieces, and then that bottom piece obviously will be here. So yeah, it's good to start to see some of the, you know, structure of the paintings. Now I'll go outside and rip down the wood that I bought. All right, so I'm out here in the garage and I'm about to rip down this piece of pine that I got from Home Depot over the weekend. And I brought my initial little scrap piece here, my test piece. And the first thing I want to decide is how narrow or how wide to make each of these long strips of wood that I'm going to cut down out of this piece of wood. So, you know, these are only going to be 4 inches wide and 5 inches tall, so I don't feel like I need a ton of material. So I'm thinking maybe even pulling them down to about 1.25 inches, I think would be plenty of material. So that would be right about here. So, you know, this gives you an idea of how thick that wood will be, which I think will definitely be thick enough to provide enough stability for the back of the panel, but also to be wide enough to have space to attach a screw from the back of the frame. So I'm gonna go ahead and rip these down, and then I'll probably cut my inside pieces, and I think maybe I'll even float the, let's see if I can show you. If I float, I'm thinking I could probably even have the panel hang off just slightly, kind of like this, where there's just a little bit of a gap over here. That way it seems like it's floating even more, you know, that way I don't have to worry about potentially showing any of the wood when you look at the painting in the frame. So when I cut these down to fit on the back of the panels, they'll be a little bit shorter than the dimensions of the panels themselves. But all right, let's go ahead and rip this down. I wanted to take a break and just figure out how much board length I actually need for all 30 of these panels. So what I've done is I've taken the total required amount of material to make one of these panels, which would be, let's just round all the way up to each dimension, right? So if we have 5 plus 5, that's 10 inches, and then 4 plus 4 is 8, so 18 inches per panel. And obviously I'm gonna go smaller than that, but it's better to round up. So if we have 18 inches times 30 boards, that ends up being 540 inches total. So if I divide that by 12 inches or a foot, we would need 45 feet of this stock material. Now, this board that I bought from Home Depot is 6 feet long. So right now we have 4 boards. So if I divide 45 feet by 6 feet, we would need 7.5 of these boards. So far I have 4, and I just measured what was left of my initial board, and we should definitely have enough to get at least 5 more of these 1.25 width boards. So luckily this one 6-foot board was enough material to cradle the back of all 30 of these panels. But sometimes if I'm working on a project, I'll stop partway through ripping down material because it's, you know, it doesn't make sense to turn all of this into an 1.25 if I only need 4 of these boards, right? So partway through projects, I'll just stop and re-measure things and do some math just to make sure I'm not going to be wasting material, because maybe I would want to use this for something else where this might be cut into different dimensions. So let's go ahead and finish cutting this piece down. I ended up with 8 boards at 6 feet long. So this is, fortunately, it's just a bit over what I actually need. This way, if I make any mistakes or if I want to make any extra backup panels, I have the same material. It just keeps everything nice and consistent and uniform. So the next step now is to bring up my miter saw and start cutting these down at their different widths. So what I might do is cut one set of sides and then go down in the basement or bring materials out here to attach the panels to the cradles, at least with this first one, and just see how I like the feel and the fit. And if it looks good, if it seems like it's gonna work, then I'll cut down the rest of these today, and I'll just hang on to them until I've cut the actual ACM panels. Also, how do you guys like my new table? I just finished building this the week of Thanksgiving, that Tuesday. So it's only a few weeks old. I'm really excited to have a nice big, flat, clean work area for building frames and canvases. So yeah, I'm really excited to have this as part of my workshop here in the garage. This is the only issue with this table. I have to figure out the best way to change out my dust collection system that I have at the moment with the vacuum cleaner. But, you know, I can't complain. It's still really nice and efficient to have the space. First thing I have to figure out right now is how and if I want to cut my corners at a miter at a 45-degree angle, so that way from the sides you wouldn't see like the kind of butt end of the board. But I'm wondering, I mean, since I'm planning to have the material overhang a little bit, maybe something like this, maybe it doesn't matter if I have that 45-degree angle. Plus, I'll use less material that way. So if I'm coming in, right? So let's say if I cut it somewhere around there, maybe a little bit longer than that. Let's see, what would that be? 3.5. That would leave about a 1/4 inch around the side of the panel on both sides. That might work. Maybe I'll go a little bit more, like 3 5/8. How about that? Let's go 3 5/8. So I'll cut 2 pieces at this length for the top and the bottom, and then we'll just kind of place them on the back here and see if we want to add another little bit of material down at the bottom, because what I'm trying to figure out is how I want to attach the screws in from the back of the frame once I build all the frames. Typically, I'll go with 1 screw per side, so like there would be a screw here, a screw here, here, and here into the cradle. But because this is such a small panel, it's pretty lightweight. Maybe it only needs 2 screws in the top and the bottom, or even 3 screws. Like if it was, you know, 2 at the top here and 1 at the bottom in the middle, like a triangle, that might be enough. These are the things that I kind of figure out just as I go. The other thing I want to consider is whether or not I would rather have the sides be cradled. Structurally, I'm not sure what would be stronger, to have a vertical cradling or horizontal on the top and bottom. Now that being said, some of these might end up as portrait paintings versus landscape paintings. So, you know, it might not really make much of a difference in the end because they're going to be kind of mixed in that way. But why don't I just initially cut this piece for the top and the bottom, and we'll see how we feel. So even if I just wanted to add another piece on the longer dimension, I only have about 2 inches, maybe a little bit more, maybe 2 1/4 probably, to fit another little piece of wood. You know, it's like, is it really worth it to do that? Does this seem strong enough? I've done this before with other like masonite panels where it's only had the 2 you know, boards to kind of cradle the back and to give the screw for the frame something to attach to. So this might actually be enough just to do 2 on each side, as long as the, you know, my adhesive, my 2-part epoxy is going to be strong enough to really bond to the ACM panel. And really that's going to come down to scoring the aluminum on this side and really weighing down the board while it's gluing for those, you know, 20 minutes or so. And then the other thing I'll have to really think about is making sure that I'm paying attention to which side is being glued down, because, you know, with pine especially, it's easy to get boards that have a slight curve or bow, and it would make more sense to have it curve towards the panel than away from the panel. So as I'm gluing, I'll be paying attention to which side I end up gluing down to the ACM panel there. But I'm gonna go ahead and just glue these 2 pieces down and then let it dry and see how it feels before I decide to add anything else later on. Might as well try to keep my table clean as long as I can. I haven't put any kind of seal on this MDF, so anything that gets on here is going to really soak in. So let's go ahead and use a scrap piece of MDF. I have to go grab my 2-part epoxy and a few materials, so I'll be right back. Okay, so I've got a couple of gloves. Here's the 2-part epoxy I'm going to use, and then I'm going to use the same box cutter to score the back of the panel. Let me grab something to mix the epoxy with. Just gonna use this little scrap piece of MDF and this little stick of wood. All right, so I also have a extra piece of MDF, and this is what I'm gonna use to weigh down the boards that are curing, and then I'll put this big container of ice salt that we have in our garage, which is pretty heavy. So let's put the gloves on. Actually, maybe I'll score this first. So we're just gonna make a bunch of little marks on the backside. Kind of cross hatching seems to work well. Maybe a few long straight lines as well. So if this works, I'll just end up doing this for all 30 panels, and I'll typically then it'll just become kind of like an assembly line process where the next step then would be to cut down all of these, chop down all of these pieces, and then sit and glue all of them at the same time. So hopefully we'll like how this turns out. Can go ahead and place down our pieces. Adjust the camera here real quick. Do the same thing over on this side. Just want to make sure that these are fairly straight. And if that looks good, I can place my scrap piece of MDF down and we can weigh it down with our ice salt. Looks pretty good. Now we'll go ahead and let that dry for the next 20 minutes or so. All right, so I was letting it dry, and after just a couple of seconds, I was looking at this from the side, and you can see that some of the board is like pulling away at both corners. Now, I don't know if this is just like something that happens with ACM panels, but you can see on the ends here how there's a gap. And if we look at it from the side, it has a little bit of a curve to it, like the ACM panel seems to be curving away from the wood. Now, that's not really a look that I want for these paintings. I don't want them to be like concave surfaces. Plus, it also feels like maybe then they would pop off of the wood a little too easily. So I don't know if this is also a temperature thing. It's pretty cold in the garage. Maybe this is something that would work better if I closed the garage door and waited to do until it was a little bit warmer. But, you know, maybe also some of it is laying it face down. So maybe if I let it dry this way, it'll flatten itself out a bit better. I mean, I don't know if you can see that. It still seems like there's a bit of a gap around the outsides, which is just really annoying. You know, these are things that come up and you're just like, why is it doing this? So I might have to rethink the cradle part of this. We'll see what happens. I feel like I'm kind of stuck at the moment, right? Like I need to figure out how this is going to work. You know, I like the idea of the floater, really thin profile frame all the way around the paintings with a little bit of the floating gap around the paintings. I just don't know if the cradling with epoxy, which is the only kind of adhesive I can think of that would work for metal to wood like this. And I mean, part of the problem might be that I glued down more of a curved side of the pine, right? Like that might be part of my issue right now, is that working with wood that is not perfectly squared up, you know, and flat, that might be part of the problem. Recycling is getting picked up today, so sorry for how loud it is. But anyway, so I'm at a little bit of a crossroads. The other option, use a solid piece of wood that has more of an L profile. Let's see if I can show you this. So basically how this would work is that the painting panel would rest on this little ledge, and you would see the painting from the front like this, right? So, and then you would attach the painting or hold the painting in the frame with nails or, you know, little framing points, things like that. And this is relatively easy to make, this kind of stock wood. So that wouldn't be too difficult to do. The only thing then is that a lot of the painting gets covered up by this little lip or ledge. So then that would mean I would need to factor in this distance and then, you know, make sure that 4 by 5 inches is being revealed inside this part of the frame. And I don't really want to make frames like this. And I don't want to have to do that math and worry about any parts of the painting being covered up. When I'm working on a painting, I like to just paint all the way to the edge of the panel or the canvas, knowing that the whole thing is going to be seen in the frame. So I'm really hoping that I can figure out what's going on with the cradle on these. Plus, you know, I bought all of that pine to cradle these panels. You know, and part of it also could be if I do decide to make this L profile, maybe then this material could be used for the frames, but I would probably have to go and get more of this. So I don't know what the best thing to do is. I mean, I could also maybe even try gluing down the wood on the shorter side of these boards. Maybe part of it is this big open flat area is just a lot of surface area to try to glue flat all the way down. You know, maybe if I did it along this edge here, that could work. And that seems to be more of a traditional way of cradling panels anyway. It's been a while since I've had to cradle like an 1/8 inch or 1/8 inch type of panel material. Usually, most of my panels that are cradled are like 1/2 inch, so they don't really warp quite as easily as this is warping. You know, and I'm curious, I just want to look at this real quick and see if the glue is starting to set. So the glue is definitely starting to set. And on this side, it looks okay. Hopefully you can see that line where the wood meets the ACM is pretty clean. This is the side that's really more problematic. I'm sure you can tell there's this little bit of a gap on this end of the wood, which is really frustrating, you know, and it's curving the ACM panel slightly. So you can probably hear it kind of cracked. The glue was kind of like cracking a little bit there. And I do wonder if some of the problem is how cold everything is in the garage. But I'm gonna bring this down in the studio, and I'm just gonna go ahead and clamp with 4 clamps and see if that maybe starts to flatten out the ACM. Okay. Wondering if this can help fix some of the problems we're having. You know, and the bigger reason, obviously I was saying like, oh, it's, you know, I don't like how it concaves. I don't like the look of that. But the other big reason is that I don't want the panel to separate away from the wood over time, right? I wouldn't want someone to be hanging this painting and then all of a sudden the ACM panel just pops off of the cradle and falls on the floor. You know, I don't want to worry about that happening. So if I have to clamp every single panel, you know, that would be inconvenient because I could probably only clamp maybe 4 at a time. And it would slow down the process a lot. But if that's what it takes, I'm willing to do that. So it's a good thing that I'm doing this week, you know, and I'm giving myself enough time. It's the 4th of December. So, yeah, we're going to go ahead and let this dry over the next like hour and just see if maybe it flattens out. Because now, I don't know if you can see, there is a lot less of a gap all the way around. In some areas, there is still a little bit of a gap, but if it dries like this, I think then we'll be okay. You know, I think that's the key, is making sure that it dries as flat as possible. Then it'll be a lot harder for the two materials to pull away from each other, I think. Plus, you know, now that it's not as cold, I think that'll help a little bit too. But we're gonna go ahead and set this off to the side and eat some lunch and check on it later. Okay, let's take a look at our panel. I think the glue is probably cured enough. Let me try poking this with an X-Acto blade. So it's still a little bit gummy, meaning it needs more time to cure. I'm going to take off the clamps and just see if the boards wiggle at all, or if they look like they're going to start to separate, then I'll put the clamps back on. Okay. Well, so the wood is not sliding at all this way, which is good. And it looks like, for the most part, the corners are fairly secure. I think if I glue the other ones down and I clamp them right away, I think that's going to help with keeping the bond really flat on the back of the panel. The other thing is that it does seem like well, maybe not. I don't know. It's hard to tell whether or not the panel is started to flatten out a little bit. On one side, it looks relatively straight. And on this side, it has a slight bow and curve. So I wonder if maybe I should plan on doing the panels on the longer side. That might be better anyway, is to cradle the longer part of the panel. Because it's like this corner here lifts just slightly away from the panel or the board. Just trying to see if it feels like there's any kind of warpiness on this other side here. Bond-wise, it feels pretty good. I think this will be strong enough for sure to adhere into the frame. If I try to pull away, it's not like it's peeling away from the panel. So, all right, it looks like this is going to work. You know, as far as there's a little bit of this plastic sticking out here, which I don't love. Maybe I should try to trim that just a little bit. So what that means is that I'm going to cut the wood down for the longer dimension on the panel. So this way, here and here. And hopefully that will make things a little bit stronger and less prone to the panel wanting to warp. The thing I could see potentially is if the boards go this way, that the panel might want to bow kind of in this direction towards the middle. It might want to pull the panel this way and it might bow out like this, or the opposite, it might kind of flex this direction. So some of these things I think are just going to have to be experiments, right? And we'll have to kind of play around and see what seems to work best. The other thing, obviously I need to go through now and cut down all of these 30 panels to match this 4x5 inch size. That way I can plan on gluing the wood on all of them today. I think if I can get that done by the end of the day, that'll be good. And then tomorrow I can start, I can just plan to gesso all of them tomorrow. And then I can kind of just sit back and wait to paint them starting on January 1st. So if by like Wednesday this week, if all of the panels can be totally gessoed and sanded and then just like carefully stored so that nothing happens to them, I think I'll be in pretty good shape. But yeah, we're going to kind of just see how things go. You know, I do want to just kind of go through and sand just slightly. If it's perfectly flush on the edge of the panel, that's okay. It's whether or not a little bit of the aluminum got pushed up, you know, this direction. So it kind of has like a very tiny ramping edge. That's what I want to avoid. So I want to feel around the panels and just kind of sand them or find a way to flatten that part down if that did happen. Otherwise, I think we'll be okay. I've never, you know, this is new for me. I've never made egg tempera paintings on ACM panels before, so I'm excited because it's really archival. You know, I don't have to worry about the cracking that I noticed on the plywood, so I'll feel a lot better, you know, creating and then selling paintings that are not going to crack in those ways. So, all right, I guess now I just have to go through and cut down all of my panels. I'll do a time lapse for that. So, here we go. I'm going to go out to the garage and cut up all of my short little cradle pieces of wood, which then I can probably just glue on here in the studio later today. That's the plan. So back to the garage. One of the things I'm doing that's going to really speed up this process for cutting all of these similar sized cradle boards is to set up a stop block here on my fence. So now all I have to do is take my piece of wood, push it all the way up against this block, and the saw will come down right on the line that I need it to. This will make it a lot faster to cut 60 of these 3 5/8 inch little cradle pieces for the panels. Back in Home Depot. Got my clamps. Back to work. I was hoping to glue a lot of the cradles on the back of these, at least maybe half or close to half of the panels. Maybe I'll still do that before I go to bed. It's, let's see, what time is it? It's 10:30, so yeah, I think if I spend the next half an hour gluing these down with the epoxy, these can then set up overnight as well. So I'll go ahead and do that then. time for bed. All right, that brings us to the end of part 2 in the egg tempera 30x30x30 YouTube series. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you if you watched all the way through. I'm really excited to share part 3 in the next week or so. As you saw in this video, it took a lot of time and research to figure out how I was going to prepare my supports and surfaces for this upcoming work. I hope you'll stick around and see where this project takes me. If you'd like to see more of my daily posts, make sure to follow me on Instagram at Hector Acuna _studio, where I'll be posting this body of work. If you're interested in seeing some of my outdoor painting portfolio, also find me on Instagram at Hector Acuna _plein air. And then, as always, checking out my website, acunaarts.com, is a great place to see the sort of overview of everything I'm working on and things that are coming up in the future. Once again, my name is Hector Acuna. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you'll return to my channel to see what's to come. Have a nice day. Bye. Before I let you go, I did want to give you a quick sneak peek at what you can expect in the part 3 of this series. So in this video, you did see a couple of moments where I was creating a test panel. The reason I wanted to make a test panel was so that I knew that the easy gesso that I was applying and the ACM were going to mesh well together, and that there weren't going to be any problems before I created 30 of those panels. So this is one of the 30 panels that I just made. And as you can see, it's got a nice sort of soft eggshell white matte surface. And this is my test panel. So I ended up making a small painting on here that most of the process has been recorded, which I will be showing you in part 3 of the series. So if you'd like to see how this painting was made and hear some of my thoughts with that process, make sure to stick around for part 3 in the series. So anyway, thanks again for watching and have a great day. Bye.